Hello and welcome everybody. Thanks for joining today. I'm FedScoop Editor-in-Chief Billy Mitchell, and I'm joined now by Mike Brown, Director of the Defense Innovation Unit. Mike, thanks so much for joining me today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm excited, Mike, to talk to you a bit about the evolution of DIU. It's been several years since you guys were chartered and founded within the Defense Department, and you guys have done some really cool stuff. So I'd love to start there today by hearing about the evolution of DIU and kind of how it's expanded its mission over this past year.
Well, it's a great time to talk about that, Billy, because we just celebrated our 5th anniversary since then Secretary of Defense Ash Carter formed the Defense Innovation Unit. And of course, what he saw was that there is tremendous investment happening in the commercial sector in a lot of technologies that the military needs. We're talking about AI, cyber, autonomous systems. And in these areas, we need to make sure that the department has access to what's happening commercially and that we can scale that. Can we adopt that quickly? And that really is the mission of the Defense Innovation Unit. How can we accelerate adoption of commercial technology? So what we discovered pretty early on is that we needed to be more than a tech scouting function. We actually needed to do projects. So about 4 years ago, we started developing portfolios of technologies, some of which I just named: AI, cyber, commercial space. And we do projects in those fields that help test capabilities the commercial sectors develop in military applications. We're about to start our 100th project at DIU. We've transitioned about 25 different capabilities of technology that have been tested and are ready to be scaled at the department. We probably influenced today about $1 billion of defense procurement, and we've introduced 65 first-time vendors to DOD. So we're pretty happy with the evolution, but we feel like we're just scratching the surface in terms of what could be done.
Very cool, and a very good context to start our conversation today. Mike, you mentioned AI, and obviously FedTalks is part of our AI Week, our National AI Week. So I'd love to go in that direction and hear a little bit more about how you're supporting DOD's greater adoption of AI. Obviously, AI is a big topic for the DOD in recent years, particularly with the development of the Joint AI Center. But I'd love to hear what you guys are doing to support that development across the department.
Yeah, critically important technology, as Secretary Esper talked about, that being just very, very important to the military's overall capabilities. We actually started working some AI projects before the Joint AI Center was developed. And much like any project, it starts with an urgent need. So rather than thinking about the general case of how do we bring AI to the department, we start with specific needs that can be met using AI technology. So one that has been talked about often is, what can you tell from images that you might be able to apply machine learning to? So an early on project that is well known as Project Maven, we participated in developing the vendors for that. That was trying to understand, what am I looking at with those pixels? What can we do to have machines identify some of what we're looking at as opposed to having humans do that? So a different application of that we're working right now is predictive medicine. So radiologists in the commercial world are using machine learning to be able to help spot what might be the precancerous cells, so you can optimize the time of a radiologist. Another AI project that we worked on is predictive maintenance. So in the commercial sector, airlines are using predictive maintenance AI algorithms to tell them what parts might need to be changed sooner rather than later, so that we can keep this aircraft flying in the air. And we're using that same commercial technology for everything that moves within DOD, starting with the Air Force, but really expanding this to look at the Marines, Army, so for ground-based vehicle, as well as naval aircraft. This may be the first DIU project that in fact spans all of the services. And we look for projects that really have applicability across all of DOD. That's one of the things that makes DIU unique, is we're a joint organization that's focused on commercial technology. So again, how we help bring AI into the department is looking for where those user needs are and then matching that up with the best technology that's available in the commercial sector. And then how can, through a project, we test that technology, make sure it works in the military application, and then scale that. And we're continuing to do that in partnership with the Joint AI Center. Very often we'll partner on a project where they will identify what the need is, and we'll look and see who are the best vendors to work with and do that project together.
Gotcha. So I'd love to kind of take a conversation towards that. You know, when you were founded, DIU was really thought of as that that bridge between the DOD and Silicon Valley. And I know in many ways you still perform that role, but I'd love to hear a bit about, because you have that inside knowledge, what the tone of that partnership's like. You mentioned Project Maven, which we won't get into specifics on it, but there was some issues with Google backing out of that, and it kind of it soured the relationship, and it didn't sour the relationship, but there was some connotations of that maybe Silicon Valley didn't want to work particularly with DoD. So I'd love to get your thoughts from the inside on how that relationship is and what the tone of that is today.
I'm pretty pleased with the tone. So I'm glad you brought up Project Maven, because that was a widely covered project and reaction by some employees. I think it's been pointed out that the number of employees who were protesting at Google was less than those who had ties to the military, either were veterans or had veterans in their families. And what we've seen is that is very much the exception rather than the rule. We find an increasing number of companies would be interested in doing business with the Defense Department if they're a way that we need to be showing to get them to a production contract. In other words, to make it worth their while. So we've seen an increasing number of companies respond to problems or solicitations that we send out. That's up on average 40% year over year. So DIU's track record is becoming more well known in the innovation hubs, where we're trying to attract attention around the country that not only includes Silicon Valley, but all of the innovation hubs. In fact, we've had solicitations from almost all 50 states, and about half, companies from about half the states have participated in DIU awards. So we're pleased with the overall level of enthusiasm. In fact, one of the last solicitations we did was companies that could help with swarms of drones. We call that artificial intelligence for small unit maneuvers. And we had a record 111 companies respond to that.
Oh, wow.
So we're seeing a lot of enthusiasm, and what we need to do at DIU is continue to make it attractive for those companies to respond. And the way we do that is make sure we don't waste their time. We get them to a yes or no answer quickly. If 111 companies respond, obviously the key benefit we can provide, since not all 111 are going to win a contract, is to let those companies know who are not going on to win a contract, let them know quickly, so that we reflect the value of their time. There's an opportunity cost involved for them to respond to DIU. So we want to make sure we quickly let them know what the answer is.
That's great. And I think it feeds directly into my next question, which is DIU's done a tremendous job in reaching non-traditional small companies outside of the Department of Defense's traditional contractor base. You know, obviously the intent would be to scale that emerging technology, but as we all know, there's this thing in the Department of Defense called the Valley of Death. And it's, we've heard a lot of people say that it's difficult for you know, the department to scale, you know, companies, whether they're small or large, past that Valley of Death once they get those initial innovation grants and whatnot, or small OTAs, things like that, to actually give them commercial production awards. So I'd love to hear, you know, what can DIU and others at the Department of Defense do to kind of eliminate or at least bridge that gap and help those small companies get to the other side?
Right. Well, the way we look at this, as while many folks use that term Valley of Death, there's several valleys of death.
Sure.
One of those valleys is where DIU is focused today, which is if you have a product, how can I get into the Department of Defense and start scaling that? So that Valley of Death we bridge by providing revenue contracts to early stage companies. They in turn use that to go raise more equity funding. And we've seen anywhere from a 10x to, in some cases, a 100x multiplier for every dollar we provide in a prototype contract. their ability to go out and raise equity dollars that of course keeps the company funded for it to continue its development operation. So that's the principal way today DIU addresses one of those valleys. An earlier valley of death in terms of a company's development would be, how does it get started? So DIU typically has not played a role in that, but we've asked to play a role with a mechanism that we have proposed called National Security Innovation Capital, particularly relevant for hardware companies. There's a lot of dual-use hardware companies that are great ideas, but have difficulty attracting venture capital, which is moved almost exclusively to software these days. So for those areas, we propose this fund that would be a catalyst for private money, just as we talked about DIU's prototype contracts help companies go raise equity capital. And that's been approved in the National Defense Authorization Act and in the House Appropriations bill, which is, of course, up for passage now in this term of Congress. $15 million has been appropriated for national security innovation capital. So that would be a way for us to stimulate vendors, the start for vendors that we'd love to see in something we call the National Security Innovation Base. Folks we can draw on to provide answers to these problems that the military has. And then one more valley of death would be kind of further on. Once a company has a successful prototype with DIU, sometimes there's an issue of how do we get that scaled within the department, and that often requires budget dollars from our DOD partner or customer to scale that solution. So we'd love to see more budget flexibility there. Innovation funds would be an answer, or just program offices having more flexibility in how they spend their dollars. That would bridge another valley of death for companies who would have an early win with us, but would like to get that scaled through the department.
That's great. Lots of valleys of death, unfortunately, but great to see you guys are doing some great work to help those companies out. Final question I had for you today, Mike. You know, there's DIU, but there's also other similar innovation type organizations within the DoD. And you just mentioned that Congress plays a key role, obviously in funding and setting authorizations for the things that you do. So I'd love to hear about that congressional role and how Congress oversees and measures the success of these organizations, because you know, it could be difficult to keep track and to measure which ones are kind of moving in the right direction. So that's an interesting ecosystem that I'd love to hear a bit about from you as we close out.
Sure. Well, as you point out, lots of innovation activities, which is goodness for the Department of Defense. The thing that distinguishes DIU would be we're joint, so we work across all the services. Some are service specific, like AFWorks. Mm-hmm. The other thing that makes us unique is we exclusively focus on commercial technology. You could almost think of us as the Defense Commercial Technology Unit. That would be an apt name for us. We work with those other innovation organizations like an AFWorks or NavalX. Sometimes we'll do projects together. We selected the vendor base for what's called Electric Vertical Takeoff and Landing that now has become an AFWorks Agility Prime project. So we try and work closely with those organizations. The JAIC is another one. We talked about that partnership earlier because there's more benefit by combining our efforts than by working in silos. So we're very aware of that. In terms of measurement, we proposed a number of different measures to Congress for DIU. One, of course, would be transition capability. So of the projects we start, how many find their way into warfighters' hands? As I've said, we've done about 25 transition of capabilities, and we're increasing our transition rate. So the ability when a project starts for it to find its way into warfighters' hands by a number of internal improvements that we've made at DIU. And that rate is improved from 35% 2 years ago to now on its way close to 50%. So we're excited about that. Introducing new vendors to DoD. So as I talked about before, some 65 vendors we've introduced to the department because we're using commercial technology. So we have a goal of saving 10 times our budget in terms of the dollars that we save. And speed. We're all about moving at commercial speed. So commercial companies find it easy to work with us. We can put a company onto a contract to solve a problem within 60 to 90 days of posting for that, that solicitation, or when that we see the number of vendors who are interested, like that 111. That'll be a challenge to do that one in 60 to 90 days, but most often we're in that range. So those are some of the measures that we have for ourselves and that Congress uses to measure us.
Well, thanks for that. Mike, it's always great chatting with you, and it's great to catch up. So thanks so much for your insights today, and I look forward to the next time we can do it again.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed it.
Absolutely.